Welcome, my friends. Tonight, we're embarking on an extraordinary journey through time, traveling back to the untamed American frontier of the 1870s. This isn't the romanticized version you've seen in Hollywood films. This is the raw, authentic experience of what it truly meant to be a cowboy in an era when survival depended on grit, skill, and an iron will. Before we begin, if you find yourself captivated by these historical journeys, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to support more content like this. I'm genuinely curious about where in the world you're listening from, so drop a comment telling me your location and the current time there. It helps me understand this incredible community we're building together. Now, settle into the most comfortable position you can find. Take 3 deep, deliberate breaths. Feel your shoulders drop with each exhale. Let the tensions of the modern world fade away as we step backward through the corridor of time, emerging into a world where electricity doesn't exist, where the nearest town might be a week's ride away, and where your life depends on your relationship with a horse and the vast, unforgiving landscape. Close your eyes for just a moment. When you open them, everything has changed. The year is 1873. You're no longer in the comfort of your home. Instead, you're lying on rough ground somewhere in the endless expanse between Texas and Kansas. The first sensation that hits you is the cold. It's that bone-deep chill that comes just before dawn on the open prairie, when the temperature has dropped 30 degrees from yesterday's scorching afternoon. Your body aches in ways you didn't know were possible. Your spine feels like someone's been using it as an anvil. Your hips throb from weeks of constant pressure against hard ground. Even your jaw hurts because you've been unconsciously clenching it against the cold all night. The thin bedroll beneath you has done almost nothing to cushion you from the rocky earth, and you can feel every stone that's been pressing into your flesh for the past 6 hours. As consciousness fully returns, you become aware of your surroundings through sound first, then smell, then finally sight. Somewhere close by, someone is coughing, that deep, rattling cough that comes from breathing dust for weeks on end. You hear the soft clink of metal on metal as another man checks his gear in the pre-dawn darkness. A horse whinnies nervously, perhaps sensing a coyote prowling just beyond the camp's perimeter. The smell is overwhelming and complex. There's the acrid scent of last night's campfire, now reduced to ash and a few stubborn embers. There's the earthy, almost sweet smell of horse manure, which you've long since stopped noticing except in moments like this when you're transitioning from sleep to wakefulness. There's the musky odor of unwashed men, yourself included, because bathing on a cattle drive is a luxury reserved for those rare moments when you cross a river deep enough to swim in. And underneath it all, there's the smell of cattle. 2,000 head of Texas Longhorns produce a scent that permeates everything. Your clothes, your hair, even your food seems to taste faintly of cow. It's an aroma that combines grass, dirt, sweat, and something wild and untamable that speaks to the semi-feral nature of these animals. You force your eyes open, though they resist, crusted with sleep and the ever-present dust that infiltrates every crevice of your body. The sky above is that particular shade of deep blue-gray that exists only in the half hour before sunrise. The stars are still visible, though fading, and you can make out the familiar shape of the Big Dipper, which has been your compass and clock throughout this journey. Around you, dark shapes are beginning to stir. These are your companions for this cattle drive. 15 other men whose lives have become intertwined with yours through shared hardship and common purpose. You don't know all their stories. Cowboys tend to be private about their pasts. But you know them in the ways that matter out here. You know that Tom, the grizzled veteran to your left, can rope a running steer from 50 yards away. You know that young Billy, barely 17, rides with a recklessness born of youth and a desperate need to prove himself. You know that Diego, the Mexican vaquero, knows more about handling cattle than all the rest of you combined. A voice cuts through the morning stillness, rough as sandpaper and twice as abrasive. Time to earn your keep, boys. Sun'll be up soon, and we've got ground to cover. That's Jameson, your trail boss, a man whose face looks like it's been carved from the same hard rock as the Badlands. He's maybe 45, though life on the frontier has a way of aging a man beyond his years. 3 deep scars run across his left cheek, souvenirs from a longhorn that took exception to being herded 10 years back. You sit up, every vertebra in your spine protesting the movement. Your hands automatically go to your lower back, trying to massage away some of the stiffness. It doesn't help much. You've learned over the past month that nothing really helps except getting moving, letting your muscles warm up and stretch out through activity rather than rest. The blanket that's been keeping you marginally warm throughout the night falls away, and the cold morning air hits you like a physical blow. You're wearing the same clothes you've worn for the past 2 weeks. Denim pants so stiff with dirt and sweat they could probably stand up on their own. A cotton shirt that was once blue but is now a nondescript brown-gray. And a leather vest that's more patches than original material at this point. Your boots are lying beside your makeshift bed, and you eye them warily. This is always a critical moment. Scorpions love the dark warmth of a boot, and getting stung first thing in the morning is a guaranteed way to ruin your entire day, possibly your entire week. You pick up the first boot and shake it vigorously, holding it upside down. Nothing falls out. Good sign. You shake it again, just to be sure, then repeat the process with the second boot. As you pull the boots on, you notice they're wearing thin at the heel. Another month, and you'll need to replace them, which means spending a significant portion of your wages when you finally reach Abilene. These aren't the fancy decorated boots that will become popular in later decades. These are functional work boots with pointed toes to slide easily into stirrups, and high heels to keep your feet from sliding through those same stirrups when a horse bucks or a steer pulls hard on your rope. Standing up requires a coordinated effort. You roll onto your hands and knees first, Then use your saddle as leverage to push yourself upright. Your legs are bowed from years in the saddle, giving you that distinctive cowboy walk that marks you as a horseman even when you're on foot. The first few steps are always the worst. Your knees feel like they've been replaced with rusty hinges, and your ankles crack loud enough that Diego glances over with an amused smirk. The camp is slowly coming to life around you. Cookie, the outfit's chef and probably the most important man on this entire drive, is already at work beside the chuck wagon. He's a cantankerous old man with a disposition that makes angry rattlesnakes seem friendly by comparison, but he can work miracles with flour, beans, and whatever meat is available. Right now, he's building up the fire, adding dry buffalo chips and mesquite wood to the coals, coaxing them into flames that will soon be hot enough to cook breakfast for 17 hungry men. The chuck wagon itself is a marvel of portable organization. Charles Goodnight, a legendary cattleman, designed these mobile kitchens just a few years ago, and they've revolutionized the cattle drive business. Before, cowboys had to carry their own supplies and cook their own meals. Now, Cookie has everything needed to feed the crew packed into this single wagon. There are drawers full of flour, sugar, salt, and coffee. There are compartments holding cast iron pots, Dutch ovens, and various cooking implements. There's even a crude first aid kit with bandages, whiskey for disinfecting wounds, and a saw for amputations if things go really wrong. The smell of coffee beginning to boil draws you like a magnet. Out here, coffee isn't just a beverage. It's liquid salvation, the thing that transforms you from a shuffling, aching mess into something resembling a functional human being. Cookie makes it strong enough to dissolve spoons, black as midnight, and bitter enough to make your face involuntarily scrunch up with the first sip. You've grown to crave it with an intensity that borders on addiction. As you approach the wagon, you grab your tin cup from your personal gear. It's battered and dented, with your initials scratched into the bottom, so you can identify it among the identical cups the other men carry. You wait your turn in the informal line that's forming. Nobody speaks much at this hour. Then hold out your cup as Cookie pours from the enormous coffee pot that's already sending steam into the cold morning air. The first sip burns your tongue, but you don't care. The heat travels down your throat, into your chest, spreading warmth through your core. The caffeine hits your system like a cattle prod, sharpening your senses, pushing back the fog of exhaustion that's been your constant companion for weeks now. You take another sip, slower this time, savoring it despite the bitterness. Around you, the other men are going through similar morning rituals. Some are rolling up their bedrolls with practiced efficiency, creating tight cylinders that will be strapped behind their saddles. Others are checking their gear, making sure their ropes are properly coiled. Their saddles haven't developed any dangerous cracks in the leather overnight. Their horses haven't gone lame or developed sores that would make them unrideable. The horses themselves are picketed in a rope corral about 50 yards from camp. There are roughly 24 of them, because each cowboy needs at least one spare mount. These aren't the magnificent stallions of cowboy mythology. They're working animals, often mustangs caught wild and broken to saddle, sometimes mixed-breed horses purchased cheap because they were too ornery or too ugly for town folks to want them. What matters isn't their appearance, but their cow sense, that instinctive understanding of how cattle think and move that separates a good cutting horse from worthless dead weight. Your horse, a nondescript bay gelding you simply named Buck, is one of the better ones. You've had him for almost 4 years now, and in that time you've developed the kind of wordless communication that only comes from shared experience and mutual dependence. He knows your weight, your balance, your signals. You know his quirks, the way he favors his left front leg slightly when he's tired, the way his ears flatten when he's about to buck, the soft nicker he makes when he's happy to see you. Cookie's voice cuts through your thoughts. Breakfast in 5 minutes. Get it while it's hot, because I ain't warming up seconds for nobody. It's an empty threat. Cookie always has extra food available for anyone who wants it. But the ritual of the threat is comforting in its familiarity. You drain the last of your coffee and get in line for food. Cookie slops a generous portion of beans onto your tin plate, adds 2 thick slices of bacon that's more fat than meat, and crowns the whole thing with a biscuit that's simultaneously too hard and too greasy. It's the same breakfast you've had every morning for the past month, and you'll have the same breakfast every morning for the next month until you reach Abilene. Variety isn't part of the cowboy diet. You find a spot to sit, lowering yourself carefully to the ground, because your body still hasn't forgiven you for yesterday's 14-hour ride. The food is scalding hot, and you have to blow on each forkful before eating it, but you don't complain. Hot food is a luxury out here. You've spent enough nights eating cold beans straight from the can during storms, when fires were impossible to maintain. As you eat, you watch the eastern horizon beginning to lighten. The deep blue-gray is giving way to lighter shades, and you can see the first hints of gold and pink that promise sunrise within the half hour. The sky out here is different from anywhere else you've ever been. There's so much of it, stretching from horizon to horizon without interruption, making you feel simultaneously insignificant and part of something grand and eternal. Tom settles down next to you with a grunt that perfectly expresses how his 50-year-old body feels about sleeping on the ground. Another day in paradise, he mutters, the same joke he makes every morning. You grunt in response. Conversation before breakfast is generally considered poor form. Young Billy approaches next, his energy marking him as someone whose body hasn't yet been ground down by years of this life. Mr. Jameson says we should make the Trinity River by nightfall if we push hard, he announces excitedly. Billy still thinks river crossings are adventures rather than deadly serious undertakings where men and animals drown with depressing regularity. That's so, Tom responds noncommittally, shoveling beans into his mouth without looking up. You and Tom exchange a glance. You both remember the Brazos River crossing 3 years ago where 2 men died, and they lost nearly 50 head of cattle. Billy's enthusiasm is endearing, but also marks him as dangerously inexperienced. The sky continues to lighten as you finish your breakfast. You're scraping the last beans from your plate when Jameson's voice booms across the camp. "Mount up in 10 minutes. I want to be moving when the sun clears the horizon. Diego, Tom, you've got point today. Billy, you're riding drag." There's an audible groan from Billy. Drag is the worst position, riding behind the herd in a constant cloud of dust so thick you can barely breathe. You return your plate to Cookie, who's already begun the process of cleaning up and packing the chuck wagon. Everything has to be secured carefully because the wagon will be bouncing across rough terrain all day. And there's nothing worse than arriving at camp to find all your supplies mixed together because they weren't properly stowed. You head toward the horse corral, your walk loosening up a bit as your muscles warm to the task ahead. Buck sees you coming and walks over, clearly hoping for a treat. You've got nothing to offer him except a pat on the neck and a soft greeting. "Morning, old son. Ready for another day?" The horse nuzzles your shoulder in response. Saddling a horse is a ritual you could perform in your sleep at this point. First, check the animal's back for any sores or tender spots that developed overnight. Finding none, you throw the saddle blanket over Buck's back, making sure it's positioned correctly to prevent rubbing. Then comes the saddle itself, lifted with both hands and settled gently into place. You reach under the horse's belly for the cinch strap, pulling it snug but not too tight. A too loose cinch means your saddle will slip during the day, possibly causing a fall. A too tight cinch will make your horse uncomfortable and uncooperative. Next comes the bridle, slipping the bit into Buck's mouth with practiced ease. He accepts it without fuss, which is one of the many reasons you value this particular horse. Some animals fight the bit every single time, turning what should be a 30-second task into a 5-minute wrestling match. Your bedroll gets tied behind the saddle, along with a small bag containing everything you own in this world. One spare shirt, 2 pairs of socks with holes worn through the heels, a piece of soap you've been rationing for 3 weeks, a straight razor that desperately needs sharpening, a small Testament Bible your mother gave you when you left home 5 years ago, and exactly $37 in wages, carefully wrapped in oilcloth to keep it dry. As you work, you're aware of similar activity all around you. 15 other men preparing their mounts, checking their gear, making the 1,000 small preparations necessary before a day's work. There's a comfortable rhythm to it, the communal nature of the work making it feel less like drudgery and more like being part of something larger than yourself. The sun breaks the horizon just as you swing into the saddle, and the timing feels almost prophetic. The first golden rays illuminate the landscape, transforming it from shades of gray into vivid colors. The prairie grass turns golden green. The distant hills take on purple and amber hues. For just a moment, the harsh realities of cowboy life fade away, replaced by pure beauty. Then Jameson's voice shatters the moment. Let's move these bees. Time's wasting. And just like that, the workday begins. The herd is already stirring by the time you reach them. 2,000 Texas longhorns spread across roughly 40 acres of prairie, most of them on their feet now, some grazing, others simply standing in that patient way cattle have, waiting to see what the humans will make them do today. These aren't the gentle, domesticated cattle that will populate ranches in later decades. These are semi-wild animals, descendants of Spanish cattle that escaped or were abandoned centuries ago and adapted to survive in the brutal Texas wilderness. Their horns are their most distinctive feature, spreading up to 7 feet from tip to tip on the largest bulls. Those horns aren't decorative. They're weapons, capable of impaling a horse or goring a man with terrifying ease. You've seen what happens when a longhorn decides to charge, and it's not something you ever want to experience firsthand. As a flank rider, your job is to keep the middle section of the herd bunched together, prevent animals from wandering off to the sides, and generally maintain the integrity of the moving column. It's not as prestigious as Riding Point, where Diego and Tom will lead the herd, setting the pace and direction. It's not as miserable as riding drag, where Billy will spend the day choking on dust. It's middle ground work, requiring constant attention, but not constantly heroic effort. The process of getting 2,000 cattle moving is surprisingly gradual. It's not like you can just yell, "Go," and have them all start walking. Instead, the point riders begin moving forward slowly, and the cattle near them start following. This creates a ripple effect that travels backward through the herd. The cowboys on the sides and rear apply gentle pressure, not pushing hard but just encouraging movement. Within about 15 minutes, the entire mass is in motion, flowing north like a river of horns and hide. And with that movement comes the dust. Oh, the dust. Within minutes, a cloud rises that's visible for miles. It coats everything. Your bandana is already pulled up over your nose and mouth, but it does almost nothing to keep the dust out. You can feel it in your throat, gritty between your teeth, irritating your eyes until they water constantly. By the end of the day, you'll be coughing up brown phlegm, and your skin will have a gray tint that no amount of washing seems to completely remove. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes the heat. By 9 in the morning, it's already uncomfortable. By 11, it's oppressive. The temperature will eventually reach somewhere north of 100 degrees, turning the prairie into a furnace. You're sweating heavily, but the moisture evaporates almost immediately in the dry air, leaving salt stains on your shirt. Water becomes an obsession. You've got a canteen hanging from your saddle horn, but you know it has to last until evening. Taking too much now means suffering greater thirst later. So you ration yourself, taking tiny sips just to wet your mouth, swishing the water around before swallowing to maximize the relief it provides. Buck plods along steadily beneath you, his head nodding with each step, his breathing regular and unlabored. He's in better shape than many of the horses, because you take good care of him. But even he's feeling the effects of weeks on the trail. His ribs are showing more prominently than they should, and there's a leanness to his flanks that speaks to inadequate grazing and hard work. Around mid-morning, you spot trouble. A young steer, maybe 2 years old, has decided the grass looks greener about 50 yards off to the east. He's drifting away from the herd with that determined purpose cattle sometimes get. If you don't turn him back now, others might follow, and suddenly you've got a major break that requires a dozen cowboys to contain. You touch your heels to Buck's sides, and he responds immediately, angling toward the stray. This is where his cow sense becomes invaluable. You barely have to guide him. He understands what needs to happen and positions himself to cut off the steer's escape route. As you approach, you unlimber your rope, shaking out a loop. The steer sees you coming and makes his decision to commit to the escape attempt. He breaks into a run, surprisingly fast for an animal that weighs north of 1,000 pounds. Buck accelerates smoothly, closing the distance. You're swinging the rope now, building momentum, waiting for the right moment. The loop flies through the air, seems to hang suspended for a heartbeat, then settles perfectly around the steer's horns. The rope goes taut, and Buck immediately sets his weight back, prepared for the shock. The steer hits the end of the rope and is brought up short, spinning around to face this new impediment to his freedom. For a moment, there's a standoff. The steer is strong and angry. Your horse is strong and experienced. You're the variable that will determine how this encounter ends. You begin turning Buck in a slow circle, using the rope to guide the steer back toward the herd. The animal resists at first, digging in his hooves, but gradually his herd instinct reasserts itself. He can hear his companions, smell them, and the pull to rejoin them becomes stronger than the urge to escape. Within 2 minutes, he's trotting back toward the main body, and you're able to coil your rope and return to your position. Your right shoulder aches from the throw, and the strain of managing the rope. Your hands, despite their thick calluses, are raw in spots where the rope burned across them. These are such minor injuries you don't even consciously register them anymore. They're just part of the background noise of pain that accompanies every working day. The morning stretches into afternoon with mind-numbing sameness. The landscape changes so gradually you barely notice it. The flat prairie gives way to gentle rolls. Occasional stands of mesquite appear. The grass changes from the short buffalo grass to taller varieties that wave in the constant wind like a golden ocean. Jameson rides by periodically, checking on each section of the herd, offering occasional words of instruction or encouragement. He doesn't praise, that's not his style. But if he says nothing, that means you're doing your job adequately. Given his legendary temper, adequate is as good as it gets. Around 2 in the afternoon, Diego suddenly raises his hand, the signal for everyone to pay attention. You look ahead and see what's caught his notice. About a mile in front of the herd, There's a depression in the land, probably a dry creek bed. The ground around it looks soft, possibly muddy if there's any subsurface water. Taking a herd through there could be tricky. Jameson rides forward to consult with Diego and Tom. They confer for several minutes, occasionally pointing at different features of the landscape. Finally, Jameson makes his decision, visible in the way he sits straighter in his saddle and gestures to the west. They'll angle the herd away from the depression, adding maybe half a mile to the day's journey, but avoiding potential disaster. This is the kind of decision-making that separates good trail bosses from poor ones. A poor boss would push straight ahead, and maybe nothing bad would happen. Or maybe 20 cattle would get mired in mud, requiring hours of back-breaking work to extract them, if they could be saved at all. Jameson's extra 30 years of experience is worth every penny of his higher wages. The afternoon heat peaks, and then very slowly begins to diminish. The sun is still bright, and the temperature still oppressive, but there's a subtle change in the quality of the light that tells experienced plainsmen evening is eventually coming. You've learned to read these signs, to judge time by the position of shadows, to estimate distances by the color of distant hills, to predict weather by the movement of clouds and the behavior of animals. Around 5 o'clock, you see what you've been hoping for all day. About 2 miles ahead, there's a line of darker green cutting across the landscape. Trees. And trees mean water. Specifically, based on the maps Jameson carries, this should be a decent-sized creek that will provide enough water for the entire herd and good grazing for tonight's camp. The cattle sense the water too. Their pace picks up slightly, heads lifting, nostrils flaring as they catch the scent of moisture on the breeze. This makes them easier to manage in some ways, because they're moving willingly toward a goal, but harder in others because their eagerness could turn into a stampede if something spooks them. Jameson signals for the herd to be slowed and spread out as you approach the creek. The last thing anyone needs is 2,000 cattle trying to reach the water simultaneously, creating a crush that could result in animals drowning or being trampled. The cowboys position themselves carefully, creating a living fence that channels the cattle into manageable groups. The lead animals reach the creek and lower their heads to drink, and the sight of it makes you realize how desperately thirsty you are too. Your canteen has been empty for the past 2 hours. Your throat feels like it's been scoured with sandpaper. Your lips are cracked and bleeding. But you can't drink yet. The cattle come first. Always. It takes nearly an hour to get all the animals watered and moved to their bed ground for the night. Only then, finally, do you dismount. Your legs nearly buckle when they take your weight. You've been in the saddle for close to 12 hours, and your body has almost forgotten how to function on foot. You walk like a sailor just off a ship, your bow-legged gait exaggerated by muscle fatigue. Buck needs attention before you can tend to yourself. You lead him to the creek and let him drink, but not too much all at once, because a horse that drinks too heavily after hard work can colic. While he drinks, You run your hands over his body, checking for injuries or sore spots. You find a small rub on his right shoulder, where the saddle blanket must have wrinkled during the day. It's not serious yet, but it needs watching. You remove his saddle and bridle, and immediately start brushing him down. Out here, you don't have proper brushes, so you use handfuls of grass, rubbing down his sweaty coat, removing the worst of the salt and dirt. It's a task that takes about 20 minutes, and by the time you're done, your arms are trembling with fatigue. Only when Buck is rubbed down, watered, fed with the sparse grass near the picket line, and securely tied for the night do you allow yourself to approach the creek. You kneel at the edge, mindful not to muddy the water that others will be using, and lower your face into the cool, clear stream. The first swallow is pure bliss. You drink deeply, greedily, feeling the water fill your stomach, rehydrating cells that have been crying out for moisture all day. When you finally raise your head, water dripping from your hair and running down your neck, you catch sight of your reflection in a calm pool. The face looking back at you is almost unrecognizable. Your skin is burned dark brown by constant sun exposure. Your eyes are bloodshot and sunken. Your lips are cracked and peeling. There's a line of pure white skin where your hat sits, making you look like you're wearing a mask. You look 10 years older than you did when this drive started. The chuck wagon has already been set up about 100 yards from the water. Cookie has worked his magic again, and the smell of coffee and cooking food draws the cowboys like iron filings to a magnet. You join the line, too tired to talk, too hungry to care what's being served. Tonight's dinner is a minor variation on the usual theme. Beans, yes, but Cookie has added some wild onions he found earlier in the day, giving the dish actual flavor beyond salt and pork fat. There's bacon, thick cut and crispy. And, miracle of miracles, there are real biscuits, not the rock-hard trail bread you've been choking down for weeks. You find a spot to sit, your back against a wagon wheel, and eat slowly, savoring every bite. Around you, other men are doing the same. Conversation is minimal. Everyone is too exhausted for much beyond eating and preparing for sleep. Tomorrow will bring more of the same. More riding, more dust, more cattle that want to go anywhere except where you need them to go. But tonight, with your belly full and your thirst quenched, with the sunset painting the western sky in shades of orange and purple, with the soft sounds of the herd settling for the night, there's a moment of peace. It won't last. Peace never does on a cattle drive. But for now, for this one perfect moment, it's enough. Darkness falls quickly on the prairie, the last light bleeding from the sky as if someone pulled a curtain across the world. Within minutes, the temperature drops 20 degrees. And you're reaching for the jacket you tied behind your saddle this morning. The wool is scratchy and smells like campfire smoke and horse sweat, but it's warm, and warmth is all that matters now. Jameson moves through the camp, announcing the night watch assignments. First watch, Martinez, Johnson, Billy, and Coates. Second watch, Anderson, Tom, Diego, and Carson. Third watch. You listen carefully, relieved when your name isn't called for first watch, which means giving up sleep right after dinner, or second watch, which means being woken in the middle of your deepest sleep. Third watch isn't ideal. You'll be roused around 3 in the morning, but at least you'll get a solid block of rest first. The men on first watch prepare their horses and ride out into the darkness, their silhouettes disappearing into the night. Soon, you can hear them singing, their voices carrying across the prairie in the still air. It's not concert-quality music. Cowboys aren't chosen for their vocal abilities. But the sound serves a vital purpose, keeping the cattle calm, letting them know where the riders are, preventing the kind of startled reactions that can trigger a stampede. You spread your bedroll near the fire, not too close because the smoke will choke you, but close enough to benefit from the residual warmth. Your saddle becomes your pillow, positioned so you can grab it quickly if you need to mount in a hurry. Your boots come off, and you massage your feet, feeling the blisters that have formed on your heels, and the places where your toenails are threatening to come off entirely. The stars emerge in their billions, so many and so bright that you can actually see by their light. Out here, far from any town or settlement, the night sky is a spectacle that never loses its power to amaze. You can see the Milky Way stretching across the heavens like a river of light. You can identify individual constellations: Orion, Cassiopeia, Ursa Major. These stars have been the cowboys' companions for centuries, providing navigation, marking time, offering a kind of companionship in the vast loneliness of the plains. Sleep should come easily. You're exhausted enough that you could probably sleep standing up, but your mind won't quiet. It keeps circling back to the same thought. Tomorrow is River Day. The Trinity River isn't the biggest or most dangerous you've crossed, but every river crossing carries the potential for disaster. You've seen men drown. You've seen horses break their legs on submerged rocks. You've seen cattle panic and trample each other in the water. When sleep finally comes, it's shallow and dream-filled. You dream of water, of being caught in a current you can't fight, of watching bucks struggle and sink beneath the surface while you float helplessly away. You jerk awake twice, heart pounding, before finally falling into a deeper sleep around midnight. What feels like 5 minutes later, a hand is shaking your shoulder. "Time for your watch," a voice whispers. It's Carson from second watch, his face barely visible in the darkness. The fire has burned down to coals, and the camp is silent except for the snoring of men too exhausted to care about comfort. You force yourself to sit up, every muscle screaming in protest. It's that peculiar kind of stiffness that comes from being awakened from deep sleep, where your body feels like it's been filled with concrete. You pull on your boots, not bothering to shake them this time because you're too tired to care if there's a scorpion in there, and immediately stand up. If you sit back down, even for a second, you'll fall asleep again. The coffee pot still sits at the edge of the coals, and you pour yourself a cup of the thick, dark liquid. It's lukewarm at best and tastes like distilled bitterness, but the caffeine hits your system like a slap across the face, shocking you into something resembling alertness. Your horse is where you left him, dozing on his feet in that way horses have. He's not pleased to be disturbed at this hour, and he makes his displeasure known by attempting to step on your foot while you're saddling him. You're too tired to scold him. Just nudge him aside and continue working. The other members of Third Watch are similarly subdued, moving through their preparations with minimal conversation. Night Watch isn't a time for talking. It's a time for vigilance, for listening to the sounds of the prairie, for watching for the signs of trouble that are amplified by darkness. You ride out to the herd, taking your position on the southern perimeter. The cattle are mostly bedded down, dark shapes against darker ground, their breathing creating a collective rhythm that's almost musical. Above, the stars wheel slowly across the sky, marking the passage of time in a way that predates clocks or sundials. The work of night watch is simultaneously boring and terrifying. Nothing happens for long stretches, just the slow circuit around the herd, the soft sounds of hooves on grass, the occasional low move from a restless cow. But you know that at any moment, something could go catastrophically wrong. A coyote could dart through the herd. Lightning could strike nearby. One nervous cow could start running, and within seconds, you could have a full stampede on your hands. You sing as you ride, not because you enjoy singing, but because it's part of the job. Your voice is rough and untrained, and you don't know many songs, so you cycle through the same 3 or 4 ballads over and over. The streets of Laredo, Red River Valley, bury me not on the lone prairie. The cattle don't care about your musical taste or technical ability. Around 3:30 in the morning, something catches your attention. A sound that doesn't belong. You rein Buck to a halt and listen intently, your hand moving instinctively to the revolver at your hip. There it is again, a soft rustling in the darkness beyond the herd. Your heart rate accelerates as your mind runs through possibilities. Could be a coyote hunting rabbits. Could be wild horses passing through. Could be rustlers looking to cut out a few head of cattle. You whistle softly, a specific pattern that tells the other night riders that something requires attention. Within minutes, Tom appears out of the darkness, his experienced presence immediately calming. He's been riding night watch for 20 years, and has seen everything the frontier can throw at a man. "What you got?" he whispers, his voice barely audible. "Movement. East side, maybe 100 yards out." Tom sits silently for a moment, his head cocked to one side, like a hunting dog. Then he nods. "Deer. 3, maybe 4 of them. Hear the hoofbeats? Too light for horses, too many for a single coyote." His certainty is absolute, born of decades of experience that have trained his senses to distinguish between threats and harmless wildlife. You feel foolish for a moment, but Tom just grins. "Better to be jumpy than dead." I've known plenty of cowboys who got killed being too relaxed on night watch. It's the closest thing to a compliment you're likely to get from him. The rest of your watch passes without incident. The sky begins to lighten in the east around 5 o'clock. That gradual transformation from black to deep blue to pale gray. The stars fade one by one, the brightest holding on longest before surrendering to the coming day. The cattle begin to stir, some rising to graze, others remaining recumbent, reluctant to face another day of walking. Smoke rises from the camp as Cookie starts breakfast. The smell of coffee and frying bacon reaches you even at this distance, making your stomach growl. Your watch is almost over. Soon you can return to camp, grab some food, and prepare for what promises to be one of the most challenging days of the entire drive. Carson rides out to relieve you just as the sun breaks the horizon. Anything to report? All quiet. Couple of deer spooked me around 3:30, but Tom set me straight. Herd's calm. He nods and takes his position as you turn Buck toward camp. The horse knows it's breakfast time and doesn't need much encouragement to pick up his pace. Back at the wagon, you dismount with a groan, your body stiff from 4 hours of slow riding in the cold night air. Jameson is already up, standing near the fire with a tin cup in one hand and a map in the other. He's studying the terrain between here and the Trinity River, planning the approach. When he sees you, he gestures you over. River's about 8 miles ahead. We'll move the herd slow this morning. Get there by noon. I want to cross in daylight with plenty of time to spare. Last thing we need is to get caught halfway across when the sun goes down. His face is grim, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. He's thinking about all the things that could go wrong. Current strong? You ask. Strong enough. Water's running high from the rains they had up north last week. But there's a good ford with solid banks on both sides. We've used it before. He pauses, then looks at you directly. I'm putting you on point with Diego and Tom. You handled yourself well on that ravine crossing last week. I need experienced hands leading the herd into the water. Your chest swells with pride even as your stomach tightens with anxiety. Point position during a river crossing is both an honor and a massive responsibility. You'll be among the first into the water, and if you handle it badly, if your horse panics or you misjudge the current, it could trigger a disaster that kills men and animals. Yes, sir. I won't let you down. See that you don't. He turns back to his map, the conversation clearly over. Breakfast is a subdued affair. Everyone knows what's coming, and the usual morning banter is absent. Men eat quickly and efficiently, fueling their bodies for the work ahead. You force down beans and bacon even though your nervous stomach doesn't want food. You'll need the energy later. The morning's ride toward the river is different from previous days. The herd moves more slowly, with Jameson deliberately holding the pace down to conserve the cattle's energy. They'll need their strength for the crossing. The cowboys are positioned more carefully than usual, with the most experienced hands at key points, and the greenhorns, like Billy, relegated to safer positions at the rear. As you ride, you can see the landscape changing. The dry prairie gives way to lusher vegetation. Cottonwood trees appear in increasing numbers, their leaves shimmering silver green in the morning sunlight. Birds become more numerous, darting between the trees, their songs providing a pleasant soundtrack to the journey. Around 11 o'clock, you crest a low rise and see it, the Trinity River, a broad ribbon of brown water cutting through the landscape. From this distance, it looks deceptively peaceful, but you know better. You can see the swift current by the way debris moves across the surface, carried downstream at alarming speed. Jameson calls a halt about a quarter mile from the river. "Listen up," he shouts, his voice carrying across the entire outfit. "We're going to do this right. No rushing, no panic. Point riders go first. Once they're across and signal it's safe, we start moving the herd in groups of about 50 head at a time. Flank and swing riders keep them bunched but not too tight. Drag riders, you push steady but gentle. Nobody fires a gun unless it's life or death. Nobody shouts unless absolutely necessary. Quiet and calm, that's how we survive this." He looks around at each man individually. "Some of you haven't done a river crossing before. Keep your head, trust your horse, and if you get in trouble, grab your horse's tail and let him pull you. Don't try to swim against the current. Work with it, angle across it. Questions?" Billy raises his hand tentatively. "What if my horse won't go in the water?" "Then you're riding the wrong horse," Jameson says flatly. "But if it happens, get off, lead him in on foot, then mount up once he's committed. Horses usually follow other horses, so stay close to someone who knows what they're doing." No other questions are forthcoming. Jameson nods. "Diego, Tom, Anderson, take your positions. Everyone else, hold here until I give the word." Your mouth is dry as you ride forward to join Diego and Tom at the head of the herd. The two older men exchange a look that communicates volumes of shared experience. They've done this dozens of times, but they know it never gets routine. Every river is different. Every crossing carries its own dangers. "Stay on my right," Diego tells you. "About 10 feet of separation. We go in together, but not so close we tangle if something goes wrong. Keep your weight centered. Don't lean forward or back. Let your horse do the work. He knows how to swim even if he's never done it before." You nod, not trusting your voice. Your heart is hammering so hard you're certain everyone can hear it. Buck senses your tension and shifts nervously beneath you, ears flickering back and forth. The three of you approach the river's edge. Up close, it's even more intimidating. The water is muddy, making it impossible to judge depth. The current is strong enough that you can hear it, a constant rushing sound that speaks of tremendous power. Debris floats past, branches and logs tumbling in the flow, occasionally catching on rocks before being torn free and swept onward. Diego doesn't hesitate. He touches his heels to his horse's sides and rides straight into the water. Tom follows a second later. You take a deep breath and do the same. The initial shock is the cold. The water is frigid, mountain snowmelt that's been traveling for hundreds of miles, and it soaks through your pants instantly. Buck's hooves find purchase on the rocky bottom as he wades forward. The water rises to his knees, then his chest. You can feel his powerful muscles working beneath you, his whole body engaged in fighting the current. Suddenly, the bottom drops away. One moment Buck's feet are touching ground, the next he's swimming, his head held high above the water, nostrils flaring. The current grabs you both, pushing you downstream even as you try to angle toward the far bank. It's stronger than you anticipated, a living force that wants to carry you away. You resist the urge to fight it. Instead, you trust Diego's advice, working with the current rather than against it, aiming for a point downstream of where you want to exit but on the correct bank. Buck swims strongly, his instincts taking over. His powerful shoulders and hindquarters propel him through the water with surprising efficiency. Halfway across, a log comes tumbling toward you, carried by the current. You have maybe 3 seconds to react. Jerking the reins to the left would throw off Buck's rhythm and might cause him to panic. Instead, you lean right, shifting your weight, and Buck responds, angling just enough that the log misses his head by inches. You can feel the rough bark scrape against your leg as it passes. The far bank seems impossibly distant, but gradually, stroke by stroke, Buck makes progress. You can see Diego ahead and to your left, already in the shallows. Tom is beside you, his horse laboring but steady. The three of you cross almost as one, emerging from the deep water into the shallows, then finally onto solid ground. Buck's legs are trembling from the effort, and water streams from his coat. You dismount immediately to check him over, running your hands along his legs, looking for any sign of injury. Finding none, you pat his neck with genuine affection. "Good boy. That's a good boy." Diego is grinning, the first genuine smile you've seen from him in days. "Not bad, compadre. Not bad at all." From him, it's high praise indeed. Tom is already back in his saddle, positioning himself to help guide the first group of cattle. "Let's not celebrate until everyone's across," he says, ever the pragmatist. From the far bank, you watch as Jameson begins moving cattle into the water. The first group, led by experienced swing riders, enters the river with surprising docility. Cattle are herd animals, and once a few brave souls commit to the crossing, others follow naturally. The riders pace them carefully, keeping them moving but not rushing them. It's a remarkable sight. Dozens of cattle swimming simultaneously, their huge horned heads held above the water, their eyes rolling white with fear, but their bodies doing what instinct tells them to do. The cowboys ride alongside, occasionally darting in to turn a stray back toward the main group, their movements fluid and practiced. For the first hour, everything goes smoothly. Group after group crosses successfully. The cattle exit the water and are immediately moved to good grazing land about a quarter-mile from the river, preventing them from wanting to return to the water. Then disaster strikes. You see it developing before it happens, but there's nothing you can do to prevent it. A young steer in the fifth group panics midstream. He starts thrashing, fighting the current instead of working with it. His panic spreads to the cattle around him. Within seconds, a dozen animals are churning the water into foam, creating chaos that threatens to engulf the entire crossing. One of the flank riders, a man named Peterson, tries to reach the panicking steer to turn him back on course. His horse gets too close to the thrashing hooves. You see the animal rear up, throwing Peterson from the saddle. He hits the water and disappears beneath the surface. Tom is moving before you even process what's happened. He spurs his horse back into the river, angling downstream toward where Peterson went under. You follow without thinking, Buck responding to your urgent commands with a burst of speed that carries you back into the current. The water is even more chaotic now, filled with swimming cattle and frightened horses. You scan the surface desperately, looking for any sign of Peterson. There, about 20 yards downstream, his head breaks the surface for just a second before going under again. Tom reaches him first, leaning precariously from his saddle to grab Peterson's collar. But the waterlogged cowboy is dead weight, and Tom can't lift him. You bring Buck alongside, reaching down with both hands. Between the two of you, you manage to haul Peterson partly out of the water, draping him across your saddle horn like a sack of grain. His face is blue, his eyes closed. He's not breathing. You get him to shore as quickly as possible, where Diego is waiting. The moment you reach solid ground, Diego pulls Peterson from your horse and lays him on his back. Without hesitation, Diego begins pressing on Peterson's chest with both hands, counting under his breath in Spanish. Water gushes from Peterson's mouth. Diego rolls him on his side, and more water pours out. Then, miracle of miracles, Peterson coughs. It's the most beautiful sound you've ever heard. He coughs again, then starts gasping, sucking in air like a man who's been drowning, which he has. Easy, amigo, easy, Diego soothes, supporting Peterson's head. You're okay. Breathe slow. Peterson's eyes focus on Diego's face, then on you and Tom standing nearby. My horse, he rasps. Made it across. He's fine, Tom assures him. The rest of the crossing takes another 2 hours. Everyone is more cautious now, the reminder of mortality fresh in their minds. 3 cattle are lost to the current, swept downstream and drowned, but no more men are injured. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the entire herd is across. The chuck wagon has forded at a shallower crossing upstream, and the outfit is reassembling on the north bank. Jameson rides among the men, checking on everyone, making sure no one else is injured or in shock. When he reaches you, he actually extends his hand. Good work today. You and Tom saved Peterson's life. You shake his hand, too exhausted for words. Around you, other cowboys are tending to their horses, wringing out their clothes, dealing with the aftermath of the crossing. There's no celebration, no congratulation beyond Jameson's brief acknowledgement. This is simply what cowboys do. You face danger together, you help each other survive, and then you move on to the next challenge. That night's camp is more subdued than usual. Peterson is alive but shaken, wrapped in blankets near the fire, sipping coffee and trying to stop shivering. The cattle are restless after the crossing, requiring extra attention from the night watch. And everyone is processing what happened, how close they came to witnessing a man's death. As you settle into your bedroll, your clothes still slightly damp despite your best efforts to dry them, you think about the fragility of life out here. One moment of panic, one wrong move, and Peterson would have drowned. Tomorrow, it could be you. That's the reality of cowboy life. Death is always riding alongside, waiting for someone to make a mistake. But you survived today. The herd survived. Tomorrow you'll ride again, pushing north toward Abilene and the promise of wages, civilization, and rest. For now, that's enough. 2 weeks pass in a blur of repetition. Each day brings the same routine. Wake before dawn, choke down beans and coffee, saddle your horse, move the herd 15 to 20 miles north, make camp, stand your watch, sleep a few hours, repeat. The landscape changes gradually from the harsh plains of Texas to the slightly lusher grasslands of Kansas. But the work remains constant. Your body has adapted to the punishment in ways both good and bad. Your hands are so callous now that rope burns barely register. Your legs have molded themselves to the shape of the saddle, making dismounting feel unnatural. Your back has developed a permanent ache that you've learned to ignore because it never goes away anyway. You've lost weight, your pants hanging loose despite the holes you punched in your belt to cinch them tighter. But there's also a hardening that goes beyond the physical. You've developed the 1,000-yard stare common to all cowboys. That ability to look at the horizon for hours without really seeing it, your mind elsewhere, while your body performs its tasks automatically. You've learned to sleep through almost anything, including thunderstorms, that would have terrified you before. You've discovered reserves of patience you didn't know you possessed, necessary for dealing with stubborn cattle and even more stubborn weather. The outfit has gelled into a cohesive unit. You know each man's quirks and capabilities. You know that Diego always rides slightly ahead of where he should be because his horse tends to lag. You know that Tom's knee bothers him in the mornings, so he's slower getting mounted until he warms up. You know that Billy, for all his youth and inexperience, has developed into a reliable hand who no longer needs constant supervision. Around the campfire at night, the conversations have evolved. The early days of the drive were marked by cautious politeness, as men who didn't know each other learned to coexist. Now, after weeks of shared hardship, the talk is more personal. Men share stories from their pasts, their hopes for the future, their philosophies about life and death, and everything in between. You learn that Diego left Mexico after his family's land was seized by a corrupt governor. He's sending money home to help his wife and children, hoping to save enough to bring them north to Texas. Tom was a Confederate soldier during the war, a fact he rarely mentions, and he's been drifting since Appomattox, unable or unwilling to settle down. Billy ran away from a farm in Illinois, fleeing a father whose discipline crossed the line into abuse. These stories create bonds that go deeper than mere professional association. You're not just cowboys working together. You're brothers in a very real sense, united by shared suffering and mutual dependence. When Tom's horse goes lame and he has to shoot it, unable to save an animal with a shattered foreleg, everyone feels the loss. When Diego receives a letter at a small town you pass through, carrying news that his daughter has died of fever, everyone shares his grief. The small towns you encounter become highlights of the journey, brief respites from the isolation of the trail. Even a settlement of 50 people seems like a metropolis after weeks seeing nothing but grass and sky. You stop at a place called Seymour, hardly more than a general store and a blacksmith shop, but it has supplies and water, and the novelty of human faces that aren't weather-beaten cowboys. The locals eye your outfit warily. Cattle drives bring money to these small towns, but they also bring potential trouble. Cowboys with wages burning holes in their pockets sometimes drink too much and start fights. Herds can damage crops if they're not properly controlled. Disease can spread from southern cattle to northern stock. The relationship between drovers and townspeople is complex, a mixture of economic necessity and mutual suspicion. You buy a few luxuries at the general store. A tin of peaches that costs an exorbitant 50 cents. A new pair of socks because yours have literally disintegrated. And a bar of real soap that smells like lavender. These small purchases feel extravagant, but they're necessary for maintaining both physical health and mental well-being. The nights are getting cooler now as summer transitions toward autumn. You sleep under 2 blankets instead of 1, and morning frosts become common. This change in weather is a mixed blessing. The cooler temperatures make riding more comfortable, but they also mean winter is approaching. If the drive doesn't reach Abilene soon, you could find yourself pushing cattle through early snows, a nightmare scenario that has killed men and animals on previous drives. Jameson becomes increasingly focused on maintaining pace. He pushes for longer days, trying to cover 18 or 20 miles instead of 15. The cattle are leaner now despite the better grazing, worn down by weeks of constant movement. Several of the weaker animals have been culled from the herd, left behind because they couldn't maintain the pace. It's a brutal calculation, but necessary. Better to lose 50 head than to have the entire herd bogged down. Around the campfire one night, about 5 days from Abilene by Jameson's estimate, the conversation turns to plans for when you reach town. It's a subject everyone has been thinking about but few have discussed openly, as if talking about it might jinx the arrival. "First thing I'm doing is getting a bath," Tom declares. "A real bath, with hot water and soap in an actual bathtub. Then I'm getting my beard shaved by a professional barber. Then I'm finding the best restaurant in town and eating until I can't move. I'm going to sleep for 3 days straight," Billy says, "in a real bed with sheets and a pillow. I swear I can't remember what that feels like." Diego's plans are more practical. "Send money to my family first. Then find work for the winter. Maybe the same ranch as last year if they'll have me back." The others chime in with their own priorities. Whiskey features prominently in most plans, along with gambling, women, and the various entertainments that cattle towns provide to separate cowboys from their wages. You listen more than you contribute, still unsure what you'll do when you reach Abilene. Part of you wants to sign on for the return journey south with Jameson. The work is familiar now, and there's comfort in that familiarity. But another part of you craves change, new challenges, different landscapes. You've heard about opportunities in Wyoming and Montana, ranches that need hands for the winter, possibly even permanent positions for cowboys willing to learn the business beyond just driving cattle. The decision can wait. For now, there's still a trail to cover, cattle to manage. Another 5 days of the same routine that's defined your existence for the past 2 months. You finish your coffee and spread your bedroll. Another night on hard ground. Another morning that will start before sunrise. The morning of the 5th day dawns clear and bright, with a crispness to the air that makes breathing feel like drinking cold water. There's an electricity in the camp that's been absent for weeks. Men move with more energy, their movements less mechanical, their conversations more animated. Even the cattle seem to sense something different, their usual morning stubbornness replaced by a willingness to get moving. "Abilene by nightfall," Jameson announces at breakfast, and a ragged cheer goes up from the assembled cowboys. He allows himself a rare smile. "We've done good work, boys. Real good work. Lost fewer head than I expected, no men dead, no major disasters. When we deliver this herd, you'll all be getting a bonus on top of your regular wages." The promise of extra money lifts spirits even higher. You do the math in your head. Regular wages of $35 for roughly 8 weeks of work, plus maybe $5 or $10 bonus, means you'll have real money in your pocket for the first time in months. Not enough to change your life, but enough to enjoy civilization for a while before winter work becomes necessary. The morning's ride is different from all the others. The landscape has been gradually transforming over the past few days, the open prairie giving way to more settled country. You see fences now, actual property boundaries made of wood and wire. You pass farmhouses, some quite substantial, with barns and outbuildings that speak of permanent settlement rather than frontier transience. The trail itself becomes more defined, worn smooth by the passage of countless herds that have made this same journey in previous years. Around mid-morning, you crest a rise and see it in the distance, Abilene. From several miles away, it doesn't look like much, just a collection of buildings clustered together on the flat Kansas plains. But to men who've spent 2 months seeing nothing but grass and sky and each other, it's the most beautiful sight imaginable. The town has grown since the Kansas Pacific Railway reached it in 1867. What was once a tiny settlement of a few dozen people has exploded into a proper cattle town, the terminus for dozens of drives like yours. The stockyards are visible even from this distance. Massive wooden corrals that can hold tens of thousands of cattle waiting to be loaded onto trains bound for Chicago and other eastern markets. As you approach, the signs of civilization multiply. You pass other herds being held on the outskirts of town, waiting their turn at the stockyards. You see cowboys from different outfits, some heading into town for their first taste of entertainment, others heading back out looking worse for wear after spending their wages on whiskey and cards. You pass freight wagons loaded with goods heading west, and passenger coaches carrying settlers and businessmen. The smell of the town reaches you before you enter it properly. It's a complex mixture. Coal smoke from the locomotives, cooking food from restaurants and hotels, the distinctive smell of beer from the saloons, manure from the livestock, and the general odor of human habitation after months of nothing but clean prairie air. Jameson rides ahead to make arrangements at the stockyards, while the rest of you hold the herd about a mile outside town. This is the most dangerous part of the entire journey in some ways. The cattle have been docile on the open trail, but the noise and activity of a busy town can spook them into stampeding. Every cowboy remains alert, positioned strategically to prevent any sudden breaks. After about an hour, Jameson returns with a stockyard representative, a well-dressed man who looks completely out of place on horseback. He rides through the herd, making a rough count and assessing the quality of the animals. You can see him making notes in a small leather-bound book, calculating the value of 2,000 head of semi-wild Texas Longhorns. "Good quality stock," he pronounces finally. "A bit lean, but that's to be expected after a drive this long. We'll take them at market rate, pending final count and inspection at the yards." Jameson negotiates briefly over price, a ritual dance where both men know exactly what the cattle are worth but feel obligated to haggle anyway. They settle on a number that seems to satisfy Jameson, and hands are shaken. The deal is done. Moving the herd through the outskirts of Abilene and into the stockyards requires every bit of skill the outfit possesses. The cattle are nervous, their heads up, eyes rolling at every unfamiliar sight and sound. A steam whistle from a locomotive makes several animals bolt, requiring quick action from the flank riders to turn them back. A dog barking near one of the buildings causes a momentary panic that ripples through the herd. But gradually, Through patience and expertise, the entire herd is funneled into the massive wooden corrals of the stockyards. The gates close behind the last steer, and suddenly, after 2 months of constant responsibility, the cattle are no longer your problem. They belong to the stockyard now, and eventually to the meat packers who will buy them and ship them east. The sense of relief is almost overwhelming. Your shoulders, which have been tense for weeks, finally relax. The constant low-level anxiety about stampedes and river crossings and sick animals simply evaporates. For the first time since leaving Texas, you have no immediate responsibilities, no herd to watch, no schedule to maintain. Jameson gathers the outfit one final time in front of the stockyard office. You've earned your pay and then some. Get your horses settled at the livery. I recommend Henderson's on 3rd Street. They're honest and their rates are fair. Then meet me at the Drover's Bank in 2 hours to collect your wages. After that, your time is your own until we head back south in 1 week. Those of you coming back with me, be ready to leave at dawn a week from today. Those of you moving on to other things, it's been a pleasure working with you. It's not an emotional speech. Jameson isn't that kind of man. But there's genuine respect in his voice, acknowledgement that this group of disparate individuals became a functional team over the course of the drive. Several of the men nod, a few exchange handshakes, and then the outfit begins to disperse. You lead Buck through the streets of Abilene, taking in sights that feel alien after months of isolation. The main street is wide and unpaved, churned into mud by recent rains and constant traffic. Buildings line both sides, a mixture of false-fronted wooden structures and more substantial brick buildings. Signs advertise every service imaginable: hotels, restaurants, saloons, general stores, gunsmiths, barbers, bathhouses, photography studios, and less respectable establishments with discreet signs that simply say entertainment or rooms by the hour. The sidewalks are elevated wooden boardwalks, keeping pedestrians out of the mud. They're crowded with people, well-dressed businessmen in suits and bowler hats, farmers in overalls, women in long dresses with parasols to shield them from the sun, children running and playing, and everywhere, cowboys. Some are clearly fresh off the trail like you, dusty and trail-worn. Others are cleaned up, wearing fresh shirts and having obviously visited the barber. The noise is almost painful after months of hearing nothing but wind, cattle, and occasional human voices. Wagons rattle past, their wheels clattering on the wooden boards that serve as street crossings at intersections. Piano music spills from open saloon doors. People shout greetings to each other or hawk their wares. Dogs bark, horses whinny, a blacksmith's hammer rings against an anvil with rhythmic precision. Henderson's livery is easy to find, a large barn with multiple stalls and a corral out back. The proprietor, a heavy-set man with impressive mutton chop whiskers, looks Buck over with an expert eye. "Trail horse," he observes. been worked hard but well cared for. You want boarding by the day or by the week? Week, you decide. Good feed, plenty of water, and check his shoes. The left front is loose. $1 a day, shoeing extra. It's expensive but fair. Done. You spend 20 minutes settling Buck into a stall, making sure he has fresh water and hay, giving him a final rubdown. The gelding has carried you safely for 2 months and hundreds of miles. He deserves good care. As you're leaving, you look back one more time. Buck is already eating contentedly, seemingly unbothered by the change from open prairie to enclosed stall. With your horse settled, you have 90 minutes before meeting Jameson at the bank. The first priority is obvious, a bath. You ask a man on the street for directions, and are pointed to Murphy's bathhouse, 2 blocks down and 1 block over. The bathhouse is a simple wooden building with a hand-painted sign, and steam rising from vents in the roof. Inside, it's warm and humid. A tired-looking woman in a stained apron takes your money, 25 cents, and shows you to a small room with a large tin bathtub already filled with steaming water. Soap's on the shelf, towels on the hook. You got 30 minutes, then I need the room for the next customer, she says, then leaves you alone. You strip off your filthy clothes, peeling away layers that are stiff with dried sweat and trail dust. Seeing your body in the mirror on the wall is shocking. You've lost probably 20 pounds, your ribs clearly visible. Your skin is dark brown on your face, neck, and hands where the sun has hit it constantly, but pale white everywhere else. Scars and bruises in various stages of healing mark your arms and torso, souvenirs of work that involves large animals, and rope, and occasionally being thrown from your horse. Lowering yourself into the hot water is one of the greatest pleasures of your life. The heat soaks into muscles that have been tense for months. The water turns brown almost immediately as weeks of accumulated filth dissolve away. You scrub with a harsh lye soap until your skin is pink and raw, washing your hair 3 times before it feels even remotely clean. By the time your 30 minutes are up, you feel like a new person. You dry yourself with a rough towel and put on your spare shirt, the only clean clothes you own. Your pants are still trail dirty, but at least the important parts of you are clean. Your skin tingles, unaccustomed to being this clean, and you catch yourself actually smelling pleasant for the first time in memory. The barber's shop is next door to the bathhouse, convenient for cowboys following the same routine you are. The barber is a cheerful German immigrant who chatters constantly while he works, talking about politics and weather and the prospects for this year's cattle season. You barely listen, just enjoying the luxury of sitting in an actual chair while someone else does the work. He trims your hair, which has grown shaggy and uneven over the past months. He shaves your face with a straight razor so sharp you barely feel it, removing the beard that's been itching and irritating you since it came in. When he's done and holds up a mirror, you barely recognize yourself. The face looking back is lean and weathered, with lines around the eyes that weren't there 2 months ago, but it's clean and civilized. 50 cents, the barber announces. You pay without complaint. The bath and haircut have cost you $0.75, a significant portion of a day's wages, but worth every penny. You still have 30 minutes before meeting Jameson, so you wander the main street, simply absorbing the sights and sounds of civilization. In a general store, you browse without buying, marveling at the abundance of goods. Canned peaches from California, coffee from South America, fabric from New England mills, tools manufactured in factories back east. The frontier might feel isolated, but it's connected to a vast commercial network that brings goods from around the world. In the window of a photography studio, you see examples of the photographer's work, formal portraits of well-dressed families, images of buildings and street scenes, and several photographs of cowboy outfits posed with their horses. You consider having your picture taken, creating a permanent record of this moment in your life. But the price? $2 for a single photograph is too steep. The Drover's Bank is an imposing brick building, one of the most substantial structures in town. Inside, it's cool and quiet, a marked contrast to the chaos of the street. Jameson is already there, along with most of the outfit. The banker, a thin man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers, counts out wages with meticulous care. When your name is called, you step forward. Jameson hands you a small leather pouch. $35 base pay, plus $10 bonus for exemplary service, particularly during the Trinity River crossing. $45. More money than you've held in your hands at one time in years. You count it carefully. 4 $10 bills, 1 $5 bill, and 5 silver dollars. The paper money goes into your boot for safekeeping. The coins go into your pocket, where you can access them easily for daily expenses. Thank you, sir. It's been an honor working for you. Jameson nods, already turning to the next man in line. But as you're walking away, he calls after you. You heading back south with us? You hesitate. This is the decision you've been avoiding for days. Haven't made up my mind yet, sir. Can I let you know in a couple of days? Fair enough. You've got my respect either way. If you do come back, I'd be pleased to have you. Outside the bank, Diego is waiting. He grins when he sees you. You clean up pretty good, amigo. Almost didn't recognize you without 2 inches of dirt on your face. Same to you. You headed to the saloons? Eventually. First, I'm going to send money home to my family. Then I'm going to eat the biggest steak I can find. Then, yes, whiskey and cards. You in? You consider. Part of you wants to join the inevitable celebration, to blow off steam after 2 months of hard work. But another part of you craves solitude, time to think without the constant presence of other men. I'll meet you later. Want to walk around town a bit first, get my bearings. Diego nods, understanding. The Long Branch Saloon. That's where everyone will end up. Can't miss it. Biggest place on Main Street. You shake hands and part ways. For the first time in months, you're truly alone. No herd to watch, no companions to coordinate with, no schedule to keep. The freedom is almost disorienting. You wander the streets of Abilene as the afternoon progresses into evening. You watch a train arrive at the depot, the locomotive huffing and steaming, passengers disembarking with luggage and hope. You observe workers at the stockyards, moving cattle from the holding pens into specially designed rail cars that will carry them east. You pass by the business district where buyers and sellers negotiate deals worth thousands of dollars. Eventually, hunger drives you into a restaurant called the Texas House. It's crowded with cowboys and businessmen, the two groups easily distinguishable by their clothing and manner. You find a seat at a long communal table and order the special beef steak, fried potatoes, green beans, bread with butter, and coffee. When the food arrives, you eat slowly, savoring every bite. The steak is thick and perfectly cooked, nothing like the tough, stringy trail beef you've been choking down for weeks. The potatoes are crispy on the outside, fluffy on the inside. The green beans actually taste like vegetables instead of something that's been boiled into submission. The bread is fresh, still warm from the oven. The meal costs $1, more than you'd normally spend, but you don't care. After months of beans and bacon, this is heaven. You finish every bite, even soaking up the steak juices with your bread, then sit back with your coffee and simply enjoy the sensation of being full. As darkness falls, the character of the town changes. The respectable businesses close, but the saloons and gambling halls come alive. Piano music and laughter spill onto the streets. Well-dressed women appear, heading toward the entertainment district. Cowboys, flush with wages, begin their nightly ritual of spending everything they've earned. You find yourself drawn toward the Long Branch Saloon, curiosity overcoming your initial desire for solitude. The building is impressive, 2 stories tall with elaborate false front decoration and large windows that glow with lamplight. The name is painted in gold letters above the door, visible even in the gathering darkness. Inside, it's everything you expected and more. The bar runs the entire length of one wall, polished wood with a brass foot rail. Behind it, shelves hold hundreds of bottles, whiskey, bourbon, rum, gin, and liquors you don't even recognize. Bartenders work frantically, pouring drinks and collecting money in a continuous flow. The main room is filled with tables where card games are in progress. Poker, faro, monte, and other games of chance separate cowboys from their wages with ruthless efficiency. Some men are winning, their stacks of chips growing higher. More are losing, their faces showing the dawning realization that months of hard work are vanishing in hours of bad cards and worse judgment. Along the far wall, a stage hosts a piano player and several women in elaborate dresses, who sing and dance for the entertainment of the crowd. Their voices are barely audible over the general din, but their presence adds color and excitement to the atmosphere. You spot Diego at a corner table with Tom, Billy, and several other members of your outfit. They wave you over enthusiastically. Tom pushes an empty chair toward you with his boot. "About time you showed up. We were starting to think you'd turned respectable on us." He's already several drinks in, his face flushed and his words slightly slurred. A bottle of whiskey sits in the center of the table, about half empty. Someone pours you a generous measure in a shot glass. You raise it in a toast along with the others. "To the drive. To Jameson. To not dying on the trail." The whiskey burns going down. Cheap rod gut that's probably more alcohol than anything else. But after months without strong drink, it hits your system like a locomotive. Warmth spreads through your chest, and the edges of the world soften slightly. The evening progresses in a pleasant haze. You drink moderately, knowing that tomorrow you'll regret anything excessive. You play a few hands of poker, setting yourself a strict limit of $5 and sticking to it even when the cards turn favorable. You lose $3 and walk away from the table, which you consider a moral victory. The conversation around your table ranges from the profound to the ridiculous. Billy, drunk for probably the first time in his life, expounds on his theory that cattle are smarter than horses. Tom tells war stories from his Confederate days, tales of battles and marches that grow more dramatic with each telling. Diego grows melancholy, pulling out a photograph of his family and showing it to anyone who will look. Around midnight, you've had enough. The noise, the smoke, the press of bodies, all become overwhelming. You bid good night to your companions and step out into the relative quiet of the street. The night air is cool and clean, a welcome relief after the stuffy saloon. You walk slowly back toward the hotel where you've rented a room, the Western Inn, a modest establishment that charges $1.50 for a bed and basic accommodations. The room is small, barely large enough for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a chair. But after months of sleeping on the ground, it seems luxurious beyond measure. The bed has an actual mattress, thin and probably full of bugs, but softer than bare earth. There are sheets, rough cotton but clean. There's even a pillow, the first you've slept on since leaving Texas. You strip down to your underclothes, wash your face and hands in the basin, and collapse onto the bed. The mattress yields beneath your weight in a way that's simultaneously comfortable and strange. You grown so accustomed to sleeping on hard ground that soft surfaces feel almost wrong. Sleep should come immediately. You're exhausted, both from the day's activities and from 2 months of accumulated fatigue. But your mind won't quiet. It keeps circling back to the same questions. What comes next? Do you return south with Jameson? Do you head west to try your luck in Wyoming or Montana? Do you try to save enough money to buy land, to start a ranch of your own someday? The cowboy life is hard, brutal even. Low pay, constant danger, physical hardship that ages men before their time. You've seen cowboys in their 40s who look 60, bodies broken by years of hard use. You've known men who died young, kicked by horses, or gored by cattle, or simply worked to death by the relentless demands of the frontier. But there's also a freedom to it that civilized life can't match. Out on the trail, your worth is measured by your skills and reliability, not your family name or education or social standing. The vastness of the landscape makes the petty concerns of town life seem insignificant. The stars at night, the sunrise over endless prairie, the satisfaction of work well done, these things have value that can't be counted in dollars. Eventually, your thoughts begin to fragment and drift as sleep approaches. The last conscious thing you notice is how quiet the room is compared to a camp full of snoring cowboys, and how strange it feels to be surrounded by walls instead of open sky. Then consciousness fades, and you sleep deeply for the first time in months, uninterrupted by watch duty or cold or cattle needing attention. Morning arrives with a gentleness you'd forgotten existed. There's no harsh voice shouting you awake, no cold dawn wind cutting through inadequate blankets, no immediate need to saddle up and get moving. Instead, weak sunlight filters through the thin curtains of your hotel room, and you wake naturally, your body finally permitted to rest until it's ready to function. The bed, despite its lumpy mattress and questionable cleanliness, has provided the best sleep you've had in months. Your body aches in new ways. Softer surfaces have apparently confused muscles that had adapted to hard ground. But the deep, bone-tired exhaustion that's been your constant companion has diminished noticeably. You lie there for several minutes, simply enjoying the luxury of not having to immediately spring into action. Through the thin walls, you can hear the sounds of the hotel coming to life. Footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing, the murmur of conversations, someone coughing in the next room. Even these mundane sounds of human habitation feel exotic after months of hearing only wind, cattle, and the occasional prairie wolf. Eventually, your bladder demands attention, and you rise from the bed. Your clothes from yesterday are draped over the chair, still carrying the faint smell of trail dust despite your bath. You dress slowly, your body protesting movements that should be routine. Standing upright without immediately walking to a horse, and climbing into a saddle feels strange, purposeless. The hotel's lobby is small and sparsely furnished, with a desk where a clerk sits reading a newspaper. He glances up as you descend the narrow stairs. Morning. Breakfast is across the street at Molly's if you're interested. Coffee's 2 cents. Full meal is 35 cents. He returns to his newspaper without waiting for a response. Molly's turns out to be a small restaurant with checkered tablecloths, and the smell of frying bacon heavy in the air. It's crowded with townspeople and cowboys, the two groups self-segregating to different sections of the room. You find a seat at the counter, between a merchant in a pressed suit and a trail-worn cowboy who looks like he arrived in town even more recently than you did. The waitress is a sturdy woman in her 40s with flour dusting her apron and a no-nonsense manner that reminds you of Cookie. "What'll it be?" "Full breakfast, please." "And coffee." The coffee arrives first, strong and hot, though not quite as potent as Cookie's trail brew. The breakfast follows shortly. Eggs fried in butter, thick slices of bacon, fried potatoes with onions, and fresh bread with jam. It's simple food, but after months of beans and hardtack, it tastes like something from a fancy San Francisco restaurant you've heard about but will never see. As you eat, you eavesdrop on the conversations around you. The merchant is complaining about freight rates to his companion. Two cowboys at a nearby table are arguing about which ranch pays better wages for winter work. A farmer and his wife are discussing crop prices and the possibility of buying more land. These are the rhythms of settled life, concerns about money and property, and future planning that seem alien after months where your only concerns were keeping cattle moving and staying alive. Part of you finds it comforting, this evidence of normal life continuing despite the harsh realities of the frontier. Another part of you finds it constraining, small-minded compared to the vast freedom of the open trail. After breakfast, you step back into the morning sunshine. Abilene is fully awake now, the main street busy with wagons and pedestrians going about their daily business. The mud from yesterday's rain is drying in the sun, though the street remains a treacherous mixture of firm patches and unexpectedly soft spots that can swallow a boot to the ankle. Your first destination is Henderson's livery to check on Buck. The walk takes you past a variety of businesses. A gunsmith's shop with rifles displayed in the window, a photographer's studio, a milliner's where fancy hats are artfully arranged, a land office where homesteaders can file claims, a telegraph office connecting Abilene to the wider world through crackling wires. At the livery, you find Buck contentedly eating from a manger full of good hay. He whickers when he sees you, a sound of recognition that makes you smile. You run your hands over his body, checking for any problems that might have developed overnight. His coat is cleaner than it's been in months, and someone has already attended to his loose shoe. Henderson appears from a back room, wiping his hands on a rag. "Your horse is a good one. Settled in nice last night, no fuss. I shoot him this morning. That'll be an extra 50 cents. You pay without complaint and spend 20 minutes with Buck, brushing him down, checking his hooves, simply keeping him company. The familiar work is soothing, a connection to your trail life in the midst of town chaos. "You staying in Abilene long?" Henderson asks as you're finishing up. "Maybe a week. Haven't decided yet." He nods, understanding the indecision common to cowboys between jobs. "If you need work, the J. Barty Ranch about 10 miles west is hiring hands for winter. Pays $30 a month plus room and board. It's steady work if you're interested." You file the information away and thank him. Steady ranch work isn't glamorous, but it's better than spending your wages in saloons and ending up broke when winter truly sets in. Leaving the livery, you wander Abilene's streets with no particular destination. The town is laid out in a rough grid, with the main commercial district running east-west along the railroad tracks. North of the tracks, the businesses are more respectable. Banks, mercantiles, hotels, restaurants. South of the tracks lies what locals euphemistically call the sporting district, saloons, gambling halls, dance halls, and houses of ill repute. You drift into a general store, one of several in town, this one called Peterson and Sons. Inside, it's a wonderland of goods. Shelves stretch from floor to ceiling, packed with everything imaginable. Canned goods from California and the East Coast. Bolts of cloth in every color. Tools manufactured in factories you've never heard of. Patent medicines promising to cure everything from consumption to melancholy. Bags of flour, sugar, coffee, and salt stacked against one wall. A glass case displaying watches, jewelry, and small luxury items. The proprietor, presumably Peterson Sr., watches you with the careful attention merchants reserve for trail-dirty cowboys who might steal. You don't take offense. You know what you look like despite yesterday's bath. Can I help you find something? Just looking for now. You browse the ready-made clothing section, running your hands over shirts and pants that haven't been worn to rags by trail work. The prices are sobering. A decent shirt costs $2. Pants are $3. A new pair of boots would set you back $5 or more. With only $45 to your name, you have to budget carefully. Eventually, you settle on a new shirt, dark blue cotton that feels soft compared to the stiff, dirt-encrusted garment you're wearing. You also buy 2 pairs of wool socks, a new bandana to replace the one that's more holes than fabric, and a small bar of the good soap from yesterday's bathhouse. The total comes to $2.75, a significant dent in your wages, but necessary expenses. As the clerk wraps your purchases in brown paper, he makes conversation. You with one of the trail outfits that came in yesterday? Yes, sir. Jameson's crew out of Texas. Long drive. You fellows earned your pay. He ties the package with string and hands it across the counter. Word of advice, if you don't mind. The town marshal, Tom Smith, doesn't tolerate gunplay or excessive rowdiness. Some of your fellow cowboys found that out the hard way last night. 3 men in jail sleeping off drunk and disorderly charges. You nod your thanks for the warning. You've heard of Tom Smith, a legendary lawman who enforces order in Abilene through a combination of physical courage and strict policy. Unlike many frontier marshals who rely on their guns, Smith prefers to use his fists, disarming troublemakers and beating them into submission if necessary. It's a risky approach, but reportedly effective. Back on the street, you see evidence of last night's revelries. Broken glass glitters in the mud outside one saloon. A cowboy sits on the boardwalk with his head in his hands, clearly suffering from significant overconsumption. Through an open door, you glimpse a bartender sweeping up debris from what was probably a fight. You're passing the land office when a hand-painted sign in the window catches your attention. Homestead claims 160 acres, free inquire within. You stop and study it, feeling a pull you don't fully understand. The Homestead Act, passed more than a decade ago, promises 160 acres of government land to anyone willing to settle it and work it for 5 years. It's transformed the frontier, drawing thousands of settlers westward with the promise of land ownership. For someone like you, raised without property or prospects, the idea of owning land, real land, not just rented space, is intoxicating. But you also know the reality. Homesteading is brutally hard work. You need money for supplies, tools, seed, and livestock just to get started. You need to build a dwelling, usually a sod house that's barely livable. You need to survive crop failures, droughts, harsh winters, and 1,000 other challenges that break unprepared settlers. Many homesteaders fail within the first year, their dreams destroyed by the harsh mathematics of frontier farming. Still, the dream persists. You imagine a cabin, simple but solid, sitting on your own land. You imagine cattle bearing your brand, grazing on your grass. You imagine a future where you're working for yourself rather than for wages that barely keep you alive. A voice interrupts your reverie. Thinking about settling down? You turn to find Diego standing beside you, also studying the sign. He looks different in daylight, older and more careworn than he seems around the campfire. There are deep lines around his eyes, and gray threading through his dark hair. Just thinking, you admit. Dangerous habit. He smiles to soften the words. I did some homesteading once, before the war, in Texas, before my family's land was taken. It's harder than trail work, believe it or not. But it's yours. Your land, your work, your future. If you survive long enough to see that future, yes. Diego pulls out a cigarette and lights it with a match struck against the building. You know what I think? Cowboys like us, we're not built for settling. We need the movement, the change. Put us in one place too long and we wither. Maybe, but we can't do this forever. Bodies wear out. True enough. He takes a long drag and exhales smoke toward the sky. Which is why I'm heading back south with Jameson next week, making the same drive again, earning the same wages, living the same life. Because I don't know how to do anything else. His honesty is sobering. You see your possible future in Diego's withered face. Years of hard work that leaves you with nothing but memories and a broken-down body. What about your family? Your wife and children? Diego's expression darkens. I send money when I can. It's not enough, never enough, but it's what I've got. Maybe in a few more years, I'll have saved enough to bring the north, find ranch work that lets me stay in one place. Maybe. He doesn't sound convinced. You stand together in silence, two cowboys contemplating futures that seem equally uncertain. Finally, Diego flicks his cigarette into the street. I'm heading to the bathhouse, then getting my clothes washed at the Chinese laundry. You interested? Already bathed yesterday. He laughs. 1 bath in 2 months isn't enough, amigo. Come on, my treat. The bathhouse is more crowded today, with several cowboys waiting their turn. The same tired woman from yesterday takes your money. Diego insists on paying and assigns you to adjacent rooms. The water is hot, but not as hot as yesterday, and clearly you're not the first to use it today. Still, it's warm and wet, and you scrub away another layer of trail grime. Afterward, Diego leads you to a small building with Chinese characters painted on a sign outside. Inside, a small Chinese man with a long queue braid accepts your dirty clothes with professional detachment, as if he hasn't seen hundreds of identically filthy garments from trail-worn cowboys. $2. Ready tomorrow. It's expensive, but Diego was right. 1 change of clothes isn't enough. You pay and receive a ticket marked with more Chinese characters. With your laundry deposited, you and Diego drift toward the main commercial district. The day has warmed considerably, and you can feel sweat beginning to form under your new shirt. Summer isn't quite over, despite the cooler nights. You hungry? Diego asks. Could eat. There's a Mexican restaurant, La Estrella, just off Main Street. Real Mexican food, not the slop cookie passes office chili. La Estrella is a small establishment run by a Mexican family, clearly recent arrivals based on their limited English. But the smells emanating from the kitchen are intoxicating. Cumin, chili peppers, frying meat, fresh tortillas. Your mouth waters before you even sit down. Diego orders for both of you in rapid Spanish, his whole demeanor changing as he converses in his native language. The food arrives quickly. Beef tacos with fresh salsa, rice and beans that actually have flavor, and tortillas so fresh they're still warm. As you eat, Diego tells you about his life before the trail. He grew up on a ranch in northern Mexico, the son of a vaquero who learned cattle handling from his father. The family had worked the same ranch for 3 generations, not as owners, but as valued employees, with a kind of security rare in Mexico. Then came the political upheavals, corrupt officials seizing land, families like Diego's being pushed out to make room for supporters of whoever held power. His father was killed in a dispute over stolen cattle. His mother died of fever the following winter. Diego fled north with his young wife and infant daughter, seeking the opportunities promised by Texas. I've been a cowboy for 15 years now, he says, pushing beans around his plate. 15 years of driving cattle, earning wages, sending money home, and never quite saving enough to change anything. My daughter died last month. Did I tell you that? You mentioned it. I'm sorry. Fever. She was 8 years old. His voice is steady, but his eyes are distant. My wife wrote that they couldn't afford a doctor. The money I sent wasn't enough. It's never enough. You don't know what to say. Platitudes seem insulting in the face of such loss. That's why I'm telling you about homesteading, Diego continues. Yes, it's hard. Yes, many fail. But at least you're working for yourself, building something that could support a family. Trail work, it's just survival. You're always one broken leg away from being finished. The meal concludes in contemplative silence. Diego pays for both of you despite your protests, waving away your attempts to contribute. You saved my bacon during that river crossing. This doesn't even come close to repaying that debt. Outside, the afternoon sun is beginning its descent toward the horizon. You spent the day doing remarkably little, yet you feel more tired than after a full day of riding. Town life has its own exhaustions. I'm going to the Long Branch for a while, Diego announces. Cards and whiskey. You in? You shake your head. Think I'll walk around a bit more. Maybe check out that photographer's studio. He grins. Getting civilized on me. Next you'll be wearing a suit and working in a bank. Not likely. You part ways, Diego heading toward the saloons, and you continuing your aimless exploration of Abilene. The town is fascinating in its complexity, a microcosm of American life transplanted to the frontier. You see wealth and poverty existing side by side. Well-dressed businessmen negotiate deals, while cowboys spend their wages on temporary pleasures. Respectable families go about their shopping, while just a few blocks away, less respectable entertainment flourishes. The photographer's studio draws you in despite the expense. Inside, it's dimly lit, with heavy curtains blocking most of the sunlight. Photographs cover the walls, portraits of families, landscapes, buildings, and yes, cowboys. The photographer himself is a thin man with wild hair and ink-stained fingers. Can I help you? How much for a photograph? $2 for a standard portrait. $3 if you want it hand-colored. $2 represents nearly 2 days' wages, but something compels you to agree. You'll send the photograph home to your family in Illinois, people you haven't seen in 5 years. Let them see what you become. The photographer positions you carefully, adjusting a chair, manipulating the lighting, fussing over details you don't understand. Try to hold very still, he instructs. Any movement will blur the image. You sit rigidly as he disappears behind the camera, a large box on a wooden tripod. There's a flash of light so bright it leaves spots in your vision, and then it's done. Come back tomorrow afternoon. I'll have it developed and ready for you. Back on the street, you realize the sun is setting. The day has somehow disappeared, consumed by small tasks and wandering. Your stomach growls despite the large lunch, and you find yourself back at Molly's for dinner. The evening crowd is different from the morning. More cowboys, fewer townspeople. You recognize several men from other outfits that arrived in Abilene around the same time as yours. They nod acknowledgement, but don't invite you to join them. Cowboys are friendly enough on the trail where mutual survival demands cooperation, but in town, they often revert to clannish behavior, sticking with their own outfit. After dinner, you find yourself drawn despite your better judgment toward the sporting district. Not to participate, just to observe. The saloons are already raucous, filled with men determined to spend 2 months' wages in 2 nights. Piano music competes with loud voices and louder laughter. You spot Billy through the window of one establishment, already drunk and playing cards with men who are clearly professionals. He's laughing too loud, betting too freely, heading towards certain financial ruin. You consider intervening, but decide against it. He's a grown man, or close enough, and he'll learn his lessons the same way everyone else does, through painful experience. Instead, you lean against a hitching post and watch the parade of humanity. Women in elaborate dresses, and too much makeup call out to passing cowboys. Professional gamblers in fancy vests work the crowds, looking for easy marks. A piano player pounds out the same 3 songs on endless repeat. Town Marshal Tom Smith walks past, his presence alone enough to prevent outright chaos. Around 10 o'clock, you see something that makes your blood run cold. 3 men exit a saloon, and even from across the street, you recognize trouble. They're wearing guns low on their hips, tied down for quick drawing, the mark of gunfighters or would-be gunfighters. More concerning, they're focused on a lone cowboy stumbling down the boardwalk, clearly drunk and vulnerable. You're moving before consciously deciding to, crossing the muddy street with quick strides. As you approach, you hear the confrontation developing. "Nice boots you got there, friend," one of the gunmen says, his tone anything but friendly. The drunk cowboy, trying to focus on his tormentors, sways dangerously. "These? Just regular boots. Look pretty expensive to me. Bet they'd fit me real nice." You step between them, your hand casually near your own revolver. "Evening, gentlemen. This fellow is with my outfit. I'll make sure he gets back to his hotel safely." The 3 men size you up, calculations visible in their eyes. You're sober, alert, and clearly ready for trouble. The drunk cowboy, who you now recognize as one of Jameson's crew, though not one you know well, is barely worth the effort. The leader of the group, a man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, stares at you for a long moment. Then he spits tobacco juice into the street and turns away. "Not worth the trouble. Keep your friend's boots." You watch them disappear into the darkness, then turn to the drunk cowboy. "Can you walk?" Sure. I'm fine." He vomits into the street, answering the question definitively. With a resigned sigh, you half carry, half drag him to the nearest hotel. The clerk, accustomed to such deliveries, takes the man's money for a room and helps you get him upstairs and onto a bed. He'll wake up tomorrow with a splitting headache and a lighter wallet, but at least he'll wake up. Walking back to your own hotel, you ponder the strange morality of frontier life. You just prevented a robbery, possibly a beating or worse, yet you feel no particular pride in your actions. It's simply what cowboys do for each other. Look out for your own, even the stupid ones who put themselves in danger through excessive drinking. Your room at the Western Inn feels smaller tonight, the walls more confining. You open the window, letting in the night air and the sounds of Abilene's nightlife. Somewhere in the distance, you hear gunshots, 3 quick pops that might be celebration or might be something darker. No one seems alarmed, suggesting this is normal for a cattle town on a Friday night. You prepare for bed mechanically, stripping down, washing your face and hands, checking that your money is still safely hidden in your boot. Tomorrow you'll need to make real decisions about your future. Tonight, you just need to sleep. But sleep proves elusive. Your mind churns with possibilities, fears, hopes, and uncertainties. The cowboy life you know is hard but familiar. The alternatives, homesteading, ranch work, moving to a city and learning a trade, are unknowns that terrify as much as they attract. Sometime after midnight, you finally drift off, your dreams filled with images of endless prairies, cattle with 7-foot horns, and a cabin on land you'll probably never own. The next 3 days blur together in a routine that's both relaxing and vaguely unsettling. You wake when your body is ready rather than when duty demands. You eat meals that someone else cooked in buildings designed for the purpose. You walk streets that go somewhere specific rather than wandering aimlessly across trackless prairie. It should feel comfortable, this return to civilization. Instead, it feels constraining, like a shirt that's too tight in the shoulders. On the second day, you pick up your photograph from the studio. Looking at it gives you an odd sensation, like seeing yourself through a stranger's eyes. The man in the photograph is lean and weathered, with eyes that seem to look past the camera towards some distant horizon. He looks older than his 24 years, harder, more serious. This is what the trail has made you. You write a letter to accompany the photograph, addressed to your mother in Illinois. The words come slowly, awkwardly. What do you say to a woman you haven't seen in 5 years, whose world is as foreign to you now as yours would be to her? Dear Mother, I am well and working as a cowboy in Kansas. The drive from Texas was successful, and I have earned good wages. I am sending this photograph so you can see I am healthy. The work is hard but honest. I hope you and Father and Sarah are well. Your son. It's inadequate, saying nothing of what you've experienced, felt, or become. But intimate communication has never been your strength, and the gap between your current life and your childhood in Illinois seems unbridgeable. You pay the postage, 25 cents to mail a letter back east, and send it on its way, wondering if you'll ever see your family again, or if you become permanently part of the frontier, severed from your old life. Your laundry comes back from the Chinese establishment, and you're amazed by the transformation. Your clothes are not just clean, but actually look cared for, with small repairs made to tiers and buttons resewn where they come loose. The $2 suddenly seems like money well spent. You also visit a cobbler about your boots, which are wearing dangerously thin at the heels. He examines them with a professional eye and delivers bad news. I can patch them, but honestly, you're better off buying new ones. These won't last another month of hard use. New boots cost $5, a significant expense, but necessary. You can't work as a cowboy without proper footwear. The cobbler measures your feet and promises the boots will be ready in 2 days, custom fitted to your measurements. Meanwhile, the other members of Jameson's outfit are making their own preparations. You encountered Tom at the general store, where he's buying winter supplies. Heading back south with the boss? You ask. Tom shakes his head. Getting too old for it. This was probably my last long drive. Got a standing offer to winter at the J. Barty Ranch, doing light work, mending fences and such. Figure I'll take it, let my body recover some. Billy, by contrast, is planning to join another outfit heading even further north to Montana. Better pay up there, he explains with the confidence of youth. And I hear the country is beautiful, mountains and such. You don't tell him that Montana winters are brutal, that cowboys freeze to death every year trying to work cattle in blizzard conditions, that the better pay barely compensates for the increased danger. He'll learn or he won't survive. That's how the frontier works. Diego finds you on the 3rd day, sitting outside your hotel watching the street traffic. He's been drinking. You can smell it on him, but he's not drunk, just maintaining that steady level of alcohol consumption that some cowboys use to numb the edges of their lives. Made up your mind yet? He asks, settling onto the bench beside you. About what? About everything. About whether you're heading back with Jameson, about your future, about all of it. You're quiet for a moment, watching a freight wagon rumble past, its load of manufactured goods heading west to supply distant settlements. I'm thinking northwest. Maybe Montana, maybe Wyoming. There's supposed to be work up there, and I'd like to see new country. Diego nods slowly. Figured you wouldn't go back. You've got that look, the one young cowboys get when they're not satisfied with what they know. Need to keep moving, keep seeing what's beyond the next horizon. Is that bad? Not bad, just restless. Some men settle, some don't. I settled too early, got married, had a family before I'd finished being young. You're doing it right. See the country, have your adventures, then maybe settle when you're ready. It's the most personal conversation you've had with Diego, and you sense he's working through his own regrets as much as advising you. What would you do different? You ask. If you could go back? He thinks for a long time, staring at nothing in particular. I don't know that I'd do anything different. My daughter was the best thing in my life, even if I barely got to see her. My wife, she's a good woman who deserves better than a husband who's gone 9 months a year. But I don't know how to be anything except what I am. And what I am is a cowboy. You sit together in companionable silence. Two men whose lives have been shaped by cattle and horses and endless miles of grass. That evening, Jameson calls a final gathering of the outfit at the Long Branch Saloon. It's not mandatory, but everyone shows up anyway. The outfit has been together for 2 months. Shared experiences creating bonds that transcend employment. Jameson stands at the head of a long table, a rare glass of whiskey in his hand. He's not a speechmaker, but he makes an effort. You boys did good work. Lost fewer head than I expected. Got everyone here alive. Didn't embarrass me in front of the stockyard buyers. That's all I ask for. He raises his glass. Those of you coming back south, we leave at dawn in 3 days. Those moving on to other things, you've got my recommendation if you need it. Now drink up. I'm buying the first round. A cheer goes up, and the evening dissolves into the kind of controlled chaos that results when cowboys have money and access to whiskey. You drink moderately, aware that you need to preserve your wages for the journey ahead. Others are less cautious. Around midnight, you step outside for fresh air and find yourself alone with Jameson, who's having a rare cigarette. You're heading northwest, he states. It's not a question. Yes, sir. Figured I'd try my luck in Wyoming, maybe Montana. He nods, exhaling smoke. Can't say I blame you. When I was your age, I did the same thing. Spent 3 years wandering the frontier, working whatever jobs I could find. Learned a lot, saw a lot, nearly died a few times. Any advice? Jameson considers. Yeah. Don't trust anyone completely, but don't be so suspicious you can't make allies. Save your money when you can, but don't be so tight-fisted you miss opportunities. And remember that the frontier rewards competence and punishes stupidity without caring about your intentions. It's probably the longest speech you've ever heard from him, and you sense the respect it represents. Thank you, sir, for the job and for teaching me. He extends his hand, and you shake it. His grip is still iron strong despite his years. You're a good hand. You'll do fine wherever you end up. The farewell dinner breaks up around 1 in the morning, men drifting away to their various accommodations. You shake hands with everyone, exchange promises to meet up again that probably won't be kept, and finally head back to your hotel. The next 2 days are spent in final preparations. You buy supplies for the journey: hardtack, dried beef, coffee, a new canteen to replace your leaking one, ammunition for your revolver, a whetstone to sharpen your knife. You pick up your new boots, which fit perfectly and feel sturdy enough to last a full season. You check on Buck daily, making sure he's eating well and recovering from the long drive south. You also spend time thinking, planning, trying to imagine your future. Wyoming represents possibility, an unknown territory where you might find work, might establish yourself, might build towards something more permanent. Or you might fail, end up broke and desperate, forced to slink back to whatever work you can find. The uncertainty is both terrifying and exhilarating. On your last night in Abilene, you treat yourself to a good dinner at the best restaurant in town, a place called the Cattlemen's Club that caters to wealthy ranchers and cattle buyers. It's expensive. The meal costs $2, but you figure you've earned one extravagance. The dining room is elegant by frontier standards, with white tablecloths, real silverware, and waiters in clean shirts. You feel out of place despite your clean clothes and fresh haircut, aware that everyone can tell you're a working cowboy rather than a prosperous cattleman. But the food is exceptional. Real beef steak, thick and perfectly cooked. Mashed potatoes with gravy. Vegetables that haven't been boiled to mush. Fresh bread with butter. And for dessert, apple pie with a flaky crust that makes you close your eyes in pleasure. As you eat, you observe the other diners. These are the men who've succeeded on the frontier, who've transformed hard work and luck into property and influence. They discuss business deals worth thousands of dollars, casually planning ventures that would terrify you with their scope and risk. Could you become one of them someday? The question nags at you. You have the work ethic, the toughness, the frontier skills. But do you have the vision, the business sense, the ruthlessness that seems necessary for real success? You don't know, and that uncertainty follows you back to your hotel. That final night, sleep comes slowly. Tomorrow morning, you'll settle your bill, collect buck from the livery, and point yourself northwest toward Wyoming. You'll be truly alone for the first time in months, responsible only for yourself, free to make your own decisions and live with the consequences. The thought is both liberating and lonely. Around 3 in the morning, you finally sleep, your dreams filled with images of mountains you've never seen, valleys thick with grass, and always the endless horizon calling you forward. Dawn comes too early but finds you ready. You've already packed your meager belongings, settled your hotel bill, and eaten a quick breakfast. Buck seems eager to get moving, dancing sideways as you saddle him, as if he too has grown tired of confinement. The streets of Abilene are quiet at this hour, most residents still sleeping off the previous night's entertainment. You ride slowly through town, taking a final look at the place that represented civilization and rest after 2 months of hard travel. At the edge of town, you pause and look back one final time. Somewhere in those buildings, your former companions are still sleeping, preparing for their own journeys, making their own futures. You've shared something profound with them, bonds forged in shared hardship that will last even if you never see them again. Then you turn Buck's head northwest and touch your heels to his sides. The horse responds with a smooth walk that gradually increases to a trot. The morning sun is rising behind you. casting your shadow long across the prairie. You're alone now, truly alone in a way you haven't been since joining Jameson's outfit months ago. There's no herd to watch, no companions to coordinate with, no trail boss giving orders. There's just you and your horse, and the vast open country ahead. The feeling is magnificent. The land changes gradually as you ride, the relatively settled country around Abilene giving way to less developed territory. You pass occasional homesteads, sod houses with small fields carved out of the prairie, families trying to build futures with nothing but determination and backbreaking work. You camp that first night beside a small creek, your fire small and efficient, your meal simple but adequate. After months of cooking being cookie's domain, you've almost forgotten how to prepare your own food. The coffee is too weak, the hardtack too hard, but it's your coffee and your hardtack, prepared on your schedule. As darkness falls and the stars emerge, you lie back against your saddle and simply exist. There's no watch duty, no need to listen for stampeding cattle, no responsibilities beyond keeping yourself alive and moving forward. The solitude is almost overwhelming. For the first time in months, you can hear yourself think without distraction. Your thoughts wander freely, touching on the past, the present, and possible futures. You think about your family in Illinois, living their settled lives in a world that seems increasingly unreal to you. You think about the cowboys you've ridden with, each pursuing their own version of the frontier dream. You think about Diego's dead daughter, Tom's aging body, Billy's youthful confidence that might get him killed in Montana. And you think about yourself, 24 years old with calloused hands and a weathered face, possessing skills that are valuable only in this specific time and place. What happens when the frontier closes, when there are no more cattle drives, when the railroad reaches everywhere and cowboys become obsolete? The question is too large, too complex to answer lying under stars in the middle of Kansas. So instead, you focus on the immediate. Tomorrow's ride, finding water, making progress toward Wyoming and whatever awaits you there. Sleep comes easily tonight, your body falling into the familiar rhythms of trail life. You wake once around midnight, instinctively listening for problems with a herd that isn't there, then smile at your own conditioning before falling back asleep. The next morning dawns clear and cool, promising a good day for riding. You break camp efficiently, your movements automatic from months of practice. Within an hour of waking, you're in the saddle and moving northwest again. The days begin to blend together in the best possible way. Each morning brings the same routine: wake, eat, pack, ride. Each evening, make camp, eat, sleep. The simplicity is meditative, allowing your mind to rest from the constant decision-making that define the cattle drive. You see antelope in the distance, their white rumps flashing as they bound away from your approach. You see prairie dogs sitting outside their burrows, chittering warnings to their colonies. You see hawks circling overhead, searching for prey in the tall grass. The frontier is alive with creatures that have adapted to this harsh environment, each finding its niche, its way to survive. On the fourth day of solo travel, you encounter another rider. He's heading south, trail-worn and watchful. You exchange cautious greetings, as is customary when strangers meet on the frontier. "Where are you headed?" he asks. "Wyoming." "You?" "Abilene, then probably back to Texas." "Good cattle country up north, if you can handle the winters." "That bad?" "Worse than bad. Lost 10% of our herd last winter to cold and snow. But the grass is rich, and there's still land available if you're interested in settling." You talk for perhaps 15 minutes, exchanging information about trail conditions, water sources, towns along the way. Then you part, each continuing your opposite journey, two strangers whose paths cross briefly, and will probably never cross again. That evening, you make camp on a small rise that offers a view of the surrounding country. As the sun sets, painting the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, you feel a sense of peace that's been rare in your life. This is what you needed: time alone, away from the demands of the drive, space to think and feel without distraction. The trail has given you that gift. You realize, sitting there watching the sunset, that you're happy. Not in the simple, thoughtless way of childhood, but in the deeper satisfaction of someone who's working towards something meaningful, even if you can't quite articulate what that something is. Tomorrow you'll continue northwest. The day after that, and the day after that, until eventually you reach Wyoming. What happens then is unknown, but for now, for this perfect moment, the uncertainty doesn't matter. You're a cowboy, riding toward the horizon. That's enough. Sleep comes easily under the vast Wyoming sky, your body and mind finally at peace with the rhythm of the trail. The stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small human concerns that occupy your waking hours. Out here, under the immensity of the night sky, you're reminded of your place in the universe, tiny, temporary, but somehow still significant. As consciousness fades and dreams begin their nightly dance, your mind drifts across the landscape of your recent past. The faces of your trail companions flicker through your thoughts. Jameson's withered scowl, Diego's sad wisdom, Tom's quiet competence, Billy's eager youth. Each one carved by the frontier into something harder than they might have been in easier lives. You've become one of them now, a cowboy in the truest sense. Not the romantic figure that dime novels are beginning to celebrate in eastern cities, but the reality. A working man whose skills with horse and rope and cattle make him valuable in this specific time and place. You know the weight of a coiled lasso, the feel of a good horse beneath you, the satisfaction of work done well despite brutal conditions. The dream landscape shifts, and you're riding again, always riding. The trail stretches endlessly ahead, and somehow, this doesn't feel like a burden, but like freedom. You understand now what draws men to this life despite its hardships. It's not the low pay or the danger or the discomfort. It's the vast open spaces where a man can breathe deeply, where the constraints of settled society fall away, where your worth is measured in practical skills rather than social standing or inherited wealth. But even in your dreams, you sense the change is coming. The railroad is pushing westward relentlessly, steel rails replacing cattle trails. Barbed wire is beginning to crisscross the open range, transforming common grazing land into private property. Towns are sprouting where wilderness once reigned. The frontier that made the cowboy necessary is slowly, inexorably closing. Your generation might be the last to experience this life in its purest form. The young men who come after you will find a different West, more settled, more civilized, more constrained. They might still call themselves cowboys, but the work will be different, the freedom more limited, the wildness tamed. This thought should sadden you, but instead you feel grateful. You were born at exactly the right moment to experience something extraordinary. The transformation of a continent, the brief flowering of a unique American character, the collision between wilderness and civilization that created the cowboy way of life. The romance that future generations will attach to your era. That much you got right even in your dreams. Already, stories are being told about cowboys that bear little resemblance to reality. The dime novels portray noble gunfighters defending helpless towns, heroic cattle barons building empires, virtuous cowboys winning the hearts of beautiful women. They leave out the dysentery, the boredom, the crushing loneliness, the men who die young from accidents or disease or simple bad luck. But perhaps that's as it should be. Every era gets mythologized by those who come after, the rough edges smoothed away, the memorable moments amplified while the tedious daily grind fades into obscurity. Future Americans will remember cowboys as symbols of freedom and independence, and maybe that's closer to the truth than the hardship and suffering that dominated the actual experience. Because beneath the harsh realities, there was something noble in what you did. You took half-wild cattle across hundreds of miles of dangerous country. You faced challenges with nothing but your skills and your courage. You lived by a code that valued competence, honesty, and loyalty to your companions. You asked for no special consideration and gave none, accepting that the frontier rewarded capability and punished weakness without sentiment. That spirit, the true spirit of the American cowboy, will outlive the actual era that created it. It will be absorbed into the national character, shaping how Americans think about themselves and their relationship to challenge and opportunity. Long after the last cattle drive, long after the frontier is closed completely, something of what you lived through will persist in the American imagination. Your dream shifts again, and you're back under the stars, no longer riding but simply existing in that liminal space between sleep and waking. The cold night air touches your face, and you pull your blanket tighter without fully emerging from sleep. Tomorrow you'll wake and continue your journey toward Wyoming and whatever future awaits you there. You might find steady ranch work and save enough to eventually buy land of your own. You might drift from job to job, aging prematurely until your body gives out and leaves you dependent on the charity of others. You might die young from any of the 1,000 dangers that stalk frontier life. The uncertainty doesn't frighten you anymore. You've learned to live in the present moment, to find satisfaction in the daily work, to value the journey as much as the destination. That's perhaps the most important lesson the trail has taught you. That life is what happens during the long days between departure and arrival, not in the moments of triumph or disaster that punctuate the monotony. Your breathing deepens and slows as genuine sleep finally claims you completely. The concerns of the waking world recede until there's nothing but darkness and rest. Your body recovering from the day's ride, preparing for tomorrow's continuation. High above, the stars continue their eternal rotation, as they did for the Native Americans who ruled this land before you, as they will for whoever inherits it after your time is past. The prairie grass whispers in the night wind, speaking in a language older than human memory. Your horse dozes nearby, occasionally shifting his weight, a companionable presence in the vast emptiness. This is how the cowboy era will be remembered, not in the filth and exhaustion and endless repetitive work, but in moments like this. A lone rider under infinite stars, free in a way that future generations will struggle to understand, living a life that's brutal and beautiful in equal measure. And for now, for this brief window of history, you're part of it. You're living the story that will become legend, experiencing the reality that will be transformed into myth. That knowledge, even buried deep in your sleeping consciousness, brings a profound sense of peace. The West is calling you forward, as it has called so many before you and will call so many after. Tomorrow you'll answer that call again, climbing into the saddle, pointing your horse toward the horizon, riding toward a future that remains unknown but full of possibility. For tonight, though, you sleep the deep, dreamless sleep of the truly exhausted, secure in the knowledge that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you were meant to do. The stars wheel overhead. The prairie wind continues its eternal song. And somewhere in the darkness, the American frontier, that vast canvas where millions of individual stories are being written, continues its transformation from wilderness to civilization, with cowboys like you serving as the bridge between two worlds. Your part in that grand story is small but authentic. That's all anyone can ask for. Tomorrow, the trail continues. Tonight you rest.